Ahoy there! Perhaps you haven't heard of this tale, where a man gave up his spirit to command a creature of the depths, and all in its presence feel the bite of erosion before their souls are snatched right from their skin, crushed and crippled until they drown. That's right, Hydroid, our wet noodle spawning, enemy flailing, no longer unique role having splashy boy. With the jokes out of my system, let's get down to the critique. I'll try to be quick because I don't want you to sink too much time. Okay, I'm sorry. As it stands, Hydroid is kind of a victim of time, oversaturated charging mechanics, and negative feedback loops. While contemplating the avenues of design, I found myself constantly walking into other frames. Which I guess can be expected after 8 years of Warframes. But I felt Hydroid didn't really flourish in any of his themes compared to the other frames he came into conflict with. Let's start with Hydroid's passive. Whenever Hydroid performs a slam attack, there's a 50% chance that a tentacle will spawn for 15 seconds. Sure, it's nice that the tentacle does true damage, but 200 true damage is nothing in the grand scheme of things. The AI isn't satisfying as a player to rely on, and basically nothing else in Hydroid's kit enhances this style of play outside of Pilfering Swarm. But at any point the slam attack tentacle could have been of use, you could have just pressed 4. Hydroid's first ability is Tempest Barrage, which rains down a torrent of water upon enemies. As it is now, this ability is frustratingly chaotic with the way it affects enemies with no consistency, and with the corrosive status no longer being able to fully strip armor, augmenting the ability starts to feel lackluster. But without the augment, the ability has no practical use outside of sporadically knocking down enemies. In a minimal sense, if the ability just reduced enemy armor by a decent amount and hit more consistently, it'd be miles better. TIDAL Surge, Hydroid's second ability, turns Hydroid into a forceful wave that has shown its age in its clunky controls, while also ragdolling enemies, which is disruptive as a player. While gaining status effect immunity from the augment and being able to apply it to allies is nice, Oberon can do that more with less effort. This ability just needed to have better control, not rely on its augment to have some sort of benefit outside of movement and CC, albeit, the most frustrating form of CC. For the third ability, Undertow, Hydroid turns into a puddle of water, able to pull enemies one at a time into the puddle as a baby kraken. Okay, I'm sorry. Enemies in the pool take any damage that's done to the pool itself. While Hydroid can utilize other abilities in this form, it completely takes him out of the gameplay loop for insufficient trade-off. I really feel like I should just put that on a shirt at this point. You basically have to rely on your teammates to kill enemies in your puddle. Not to mention, we get our crowd favorite negative feedback loop, as Hydroid gains increased energy drain per enemy in the pool, punishing Hydroid for functionality better done by Korra and Zephyr. Seriously, because you can barely move in this state, you either pull singular enemies into the pool or use TIDAL Surge to get more enemies. In other words, spending energy so that you can spend more energy so that you can capture more enemies. Meanwhile, Korra and Zephyr get to vibe effortlessly with their pulls and damage links while also offering more to the table. Then there's Tentacle Swarm, Hydroid's fourth ability, which spawns up to 20 very useful, magnetic damaging tentacles mentioned earlier that grab enemies and flail them around, dealing not great true damage while making it frustrating for players to do more than try to AoE them out of existence. This ability, it honestly has no real purpose outside of its pilfering augment. That's again better done by other frames. There's all that, and Hydroid's abilities scale on everything. Literally everything. Honestly, just about every reason you could find to play Hydroid leads you to another frame. With all that in mind, we set sails to my redesign and the thought process behind it. Do remember, this is just what I felt happy with. It doesn't mean it's perfect, nor does it mean it's the only route to take. I essentially got the design to a point where it flowed well mentally, but without testing, there's no telling how strong or weak, or how some of the choices are. So just keep that in mind. For Hydroid's passives, Commanding Tides. Hydroid enhances the effect of auras, per Coaction Drift, and gains an extra aura slot. This passive plays into the theme of being a captain, quote unquote, and is the bare minimum of giving Hydroid a purpose no other frame has. And on the other hand, Kraken's Mark. Hydroid's abilities apply a Mark of the Kraken. Each Mark of the Kraken permanently reduces enemies' armor by 25%.
While you can utilize one ability to remove an enemy's armor, it should be noted that each ability mark will be overwritten by the next. This will make more sense later. Hydroid's slam attack has a 50% chance to grasp mark enemy souls with tentacles, stunning them for a duration. And now for the fun part. Hydroid's slam attack will cause all tentacles in range to slam, dealing true damage based on a percentage of the captured target's HP. Rather than going through the complicated flavor of what that means, I'll give you an example. Hydroid hits a Nox with an ability to apply a mark. Hydroid slam attacks the Nox. A tentacle emerges holding the spirit of the Nox. Hydroid slam attacks in the tentacle's radius. The tentacle will slam, dealing damage to the Nox regardless of range, but also to enemies inside its radius based on the Nox's health. When the Nox dies or the duration is exceeded, the tentacle and spirit are removed. The idea behind this passive is to avoid putting all the weight and theme on a single ability and nesting it into the kit as a whole. With these design choices, it gives Hydroid a build path for slam attacks while also solidifying the usefulness and role of the tentacles. Not to mention, with the tentacles grabbing the quote spirit of the enemy, no one has to endure the chaotic flailing and ragdolling. Equally, I'm emphasizing the erosive nature of water, thus Hydroid can armor strip with any ability. I'm still iffy on the 50% chance slam tentacle thing, but since it's hitting marked enemies and not per slam, I feel like it wouldn't be too painful, especially with the other options available. For Hydroid's first ability that I didn't bother renaming, Tempest Barrage. This Tempest Barrage empowers Hydroid with a buff that causes the next weapon strike that hits an enemy to have increased damage, velocity, and splash radius, where applicable. Enemies hit by this ability are knocked down. While the buff persists, Hydroid refreshes this empowered charge after reloading. When Hydroid's fourth ability is active, all empowered strikes are followed by a Kraken Barrage, which rains down on all enemies in range. This barrage stuns and marks enemies. For its augment, Eroding Barrage, Hydroid's buff now causes all empowered shots to be followed by a Kraken Barrage regardless of abilities active. A Kraken Barrage in this case will now remove armor based on the total armor removed by the triggering Tempest Barrage. So basically, I wanted to give Hydroid splash damage, literally, without all the clunky AoE and poor scaling. I wanted to play on the idea of swashbucklers a little bit by using reloads in between each empowered strike. There's room to make it weapon swaps or make it so characters can't just use primaries or just use secondaries, etc. But I felt like reloading was the better middle ground. Having the Kraken follow up gives the feel of almost cannon fire. Visually, I see the Kraken Barrage almost as an automated water version of Ember's Inferno. It somewhat lets me salvage the current form of Tempest Barrage minus the randomness. There's room to make it based on Hydroid's armor, and the other abilities could be tweaked to back it up, but I had other plans to make Hydroid feel durable. And having the Kraken Barrage reward Hydroid for hitting big groups would ensure almost instantaneous armor strip, which was my intent to make the augment feel worth the slot. Originally, I also wanted the reloads to have a purpose as well, so there was a play on harpoons, a functionality I wish weapons like the Harpack would receive, where enemies marked would get pulled to Hydroid during the reload, but ultimately I thought it'd be too unreliable. Tidal Surge, Hydroid's second ability that I didn't bother renaming, really just needs to control that Wukong or Revenant got. After the dash, it will provide Hydroid a visual water skin buff, which will cause Hydroid to move faster and be immune to statuses. While Undertow is active, enemies Hydroid pass through will be trapped in Undertow. The more interesting way this ability synergizes is that Hydroid copies status effects applied to enemies and adds those statuses to the abilities cast in a short window after. The original Tidal Impunity was added to the base of this ability, so the new augment can keep the same name, but the effect is changed such that, while Hydroid's water skin buff is active, Hydroid takes damage over time instead of immediately. As stated previously, this ability just needed more control and better use. I wanted to sort of highlight that concept of creatures of the depths and pirates adapting to harsh conditions with the status immunity. Then there's kind of the memory and adaptability of water and the status effect absorbing. Undertow, Hydroid's third ability that I didn't bother renaming. Hydroid places a water trap in an area to capture enemies. 3 max placements. Players can hold this to sink into a puddle. If they're not standing on a puddle, it will create a new one at their location. These puddles allow transportation to or resurfacing at other placed puddles. While untargetable, however, Hydroid's energy will begin to drain at an increased rate, similar to Valkyr's Hysteria, where it takes time to reach the maximum energy drain. Resurfacing at a pool will temporarily increase the range of the targeted undertow area, staggering enemies just outside of this. Resurfacing will also grant Hydroid a buff to reload instantly for a few seconds. While undertow is active, spawn tentacles in range of undertow also create undertow areas using an independent count separate from Hydroid's maximum. I kind of imagine the tentacles having a range indicator similar to Wisp's reservoir. For the augment, Curative Undertow can stay the same and allow allies to heal a percentage of health when standing in pools. My intent again was to find a way to maintain the original functionality of Undertow while hopefully melding it with more player control and synergy. I believe this design does that while also providing an opportunity for mechanical prowess. We finally got to an ability renamed Exalted Trident. Okay, I'm kidding, I'm sorry, it's a joke, I'm sorry. I am just not a fan of making everything exalted, okay? The actual ability is Heart of the Depths. Hydroid summons a creature from the deep that haunts a large area, spawning tentacles to grasp all marked enemy spirits before marking those in the cast range. The range of its territory will creep out as the ability persists. Although enemies in the haunted territory are slowed, the creature bestows blessings to allies in its haunted territory when spirits are destroyed. These blessings depend on which ability marks the target prior to the tentacle spawning. Hydroid will regenerate energy when spirits are destroyed regardless. Things to note about this ability. New enemies marked in range will have their spirits grasped if Hydroid has less than 20 captured already. Hydroid plunders more loot from enemies that are killed in this area. In terms of blessings, it is 2 parts. The first part is loot. Destroyed spirits will drop loot as if opening a random cache appropriate to the planet. Imagine if it had a chance to be rare. Just so there's no confusion, this is in addition to the extra loot Hydroid plunders from enemies killed in the area, which is more akin to Pilfering Swarm. The second is a multiplier buff, which again depends on the last ability to mark the enemy before the tentacle spawns. For the first ability, damage. Second, credit. Third, affinity, and fourth, resource respectively. This ability causes all tentacles in range to deal double damage. All tentacles will slam regardless of range if Hydroid slams in the area. When cast on Undertow, the area will flood. All marks are removed when this ability ends. For the augment, Endless Wave, Hydroid and allies gain starting combo and slam radius based on half the number of tentacles that exist before the cast, but they maintain the starting combo and slam radius for the duration of the ability. We're gonna assume the capacity is 20 like it is currently. Ideally, the starting combo would only be granted on enhanced slam attacks. So with Corrupt Charge, your enhanced or empowered slam attacks would be at 12 times combo for the duration of the ability. Alternatively, however, the power could be placed more on the tentacles, such that the tentacles' damage and radius would scale on combo multiplier. It is possible to require Hydroid to do an empowered slam attack for this, but it's unknown if it's necessary. And that's all. I feel like I hit some flavorful and effective notes. I've at least hit a point where I feel good about the foundation of the kit. And from there, it's testing and balancing. For example, the definition of a mark could change to just being damage vulnerability instead of armor reduction. Or the blessing spirits provide could just be the usual power strength, range, etc. I had thoughts about the bonus loot Hydroid plunder spawning as a chest after the ability. But as neat as that would be, I thought it just caused too many problems. I thought about making the tentacles be pseudo-exalted and deal damage based on your melee, but you know darn well why I avoided that. I also thought about the trident, but nothing felt satisfying or really fitting for the theme and role that I was going for. I wanted to be careful not to lean too far into Nyx Necros Revenant territory and avoid making the spirits becoming allies after death. I originally wanted the buffs on Hydroid's abilities to be what the spirits granted on death, which is why you notice me emphasizing buffs gained after abilities so much. But that seemed too problematic balance-wise and would end up with Hydroid getting a statistical buff anyway. There's room for the Kraken to get AI to roam around and pull targets, but I felt the barrage added a bit of personality to it. Yes, I did have plans for Hydroid to interact with the Kraken to gain control of it, then the Kraken could just copy Hydroid's abilities or get new ones, but it felt clunky in my mind due to how one-dimensional the Kraken's movements would have to be compared to base Warframe. Yes, I also thought about it becoming a controllable stationary monster thing too, but again, Sevagoth Shadow nonsense, and low ceiling tile set issues. I also thought interacting with the Kraken could spawn arc guns to better emulate the zone being a ship, but it just felt better for another frame as slam attacks felt like a good interaction for Hydroid's tentacles. In any case, I tried something new by also giving the dev notes during a video, so let me know if that interests you or doesn't.
Like and subscribe and share it on Reddit so I get hate mail.
Like and subscribe and share it on Reddit so I get hate mail, whatever people do when they like videos. You can also find links to my Twitch and Twitter below if you sync more content. I mean, what are you waiting for?